Evening everyone, I'm Sharon. I'm losing my voice. I'm not, it's just getting croaky, so apologies, I'll probably drink a few times now and again. It's water, not gin or vodka, I promise. The talk this evening is one that was actually originally given by Gillian Arnold, who is the chair of BCS Women. She delivered it in Dundee for us last year, and we were trying to find a way to get up here, and we thought, well actually why don't we have the conversation about unconscious bias again. If you're involved in any way with a specialist group or the branches, you'll maybe have seen some emails flying back and forth recently about unconscious bias, because certain members of BCS have been put through some unconscious bias training, and they're now hoping to get it through the member groups. I'm not here to train you at all, just to start the conversation really about why it's important, why we should think about it, because as you said, a lot of time the bias is unconscious and we don't know about it. The ones we're conscious about, we probably try and do something about, or we try and ignore them sometimes, but it's the unconscious stuff, and we all have them. We do all have them. It's not just one thing or the other. I'll probably focus more on gender this evening, BCS women, but a lot of what I say applies in different ways to the subject and the other minorities. So that's me. So as a female, just in case anyone thinks I'm here to do a men bashing session, when I went to university, did software engineering at Glasgow, most of my friends were blokes. I had a couple of really close flatmates who were female, but everyone else was male. I really like cricket, Formula 1 and rugby, and there's another one, golf. You know, there's things that you might think of as typically male. So it's not a male bashing session whatsoever. I work for IBM. My job at the moment is technical leader in a sales organisation across the UK for digital engagement. That means helping companies make money out of people, basically by giving them good experiences, whether it's online or mobile, that kind of thing, which is quite good fun. I also get involved in BCS Women, as you can tell. I try and run events in Scotland because for a while they were always in London, and then our Margaret Ross, bless her, would always run them in Southampton as well, and she was kind of like the only group outside of London. So we're trying to provide more networking opportunities, shall we say. I'm also part of Women in Technology Scotland, which is Oracle and Dell and IBM and HP and Cisco. Don't forget Cisco, they started it. So get to meet all sorts of people and learn from their experiences too. Gillian put this particular slide up to emphasise a real problem that we've had, that we've been masking for a while. So we have a skills shortage in the UK when it comes to IT, we really do. And people have been solving that, particularly in small organisations, you know, startups, that kind of thing, by going outside of the UK to hire and to recruit. But now that's becoming really, really difficult there with visas and such like. It's beginning to highlight the problem that we have back in here in the UK with our own nationals, that we just don't have enough people within the country that are skilled up. And so this was 2013, September. I was Computer Weekly speaking to startups, so not just a point of view from me or from Gillian. There really is a problem, and you know, wouldn't it be nice if we could fix it within the UK and not just have to go somewhere else? When these statistics were put together, so look at the number, 933,000 employing IT professionals. Some of them will be really large organisations, some will be really small organisations. Some of them will be purely about IT, some of them will be a bank that have an IT department, you know, all sorts of walks of life. But there are many, many jobs for people who have IT skills. But there are real gaps, especially if you're a large company, getting the right people out who have got the new skills, the new modern skills, is difficult. Public sector really struggles, even though they tend to be better from a diversity target perspective. Our public sector is really struggling to get IT skills, including teaching actually, because if you're in the private sector you tend to get more money, and if there's not enough skills, job shortage, all that kind, not job shortage but skills shortage, then people are going to go potentially where there's more money. And although women are 47% of the UK workforce, we only make up 18% of IT folk, in all sorts of jobs, whether that's development or in strategy or even project management. You know, some of the less technical roles are probably have better percentages, but they're still pretty low because, well, it can be an interesting environment. Women have always been in IT. Gillian used to work for IBM as well, so she's very proud of her IBM images. Not that That's not Gillian. Should make that clear. We should maybe think about how we put this on YouTube. But no, I wanted to point out that way back in the history when technology was becoming something that the banks were using, it wasn't just specialist areas. There were women around then, and I've got colleagues who have been in the company a longer time than I have. Some of whom are retired, who say, there used to be so many more women, where have they all gone, what's happened to them? And there are lots of interesting conversations like that that we have. Everybody recognise this lady? Anyone recognise this lady?
Ada.
Ada Lovelace. So some people in the room will have programmed in the language named after her. I did, it was fun. Only at university, not in a professional life. So way back in the beginning, computers were people who did computation. They weren't machines. And most of those people were women. I actually got an email from somebody who's left IBM recently, who's male. He's not female, but his first job was as a computer. He was called the computer. They didn't have any machines whatsoever. It was him when doing the computation. It was Ada Lovelace who created the first program. She never saw it actually run because the machine hadn't been built, but once it was, it worked. So we've been around in IT for a while. Bletchley Park. We could get into a debate about the imitation game and whether we like its faults or not, that kind of thing. But how many women were there? Quite a lot. Okay, to be fair, there were circumstances like subscription, that kind of thing, which meant that potentially there were fewer men available for the jobs that the women were doing in Bletchley Park. But nobody ever said, oh, those women, they're not very good, but well, they'll just have to do. They were highly respected, they were doing their jobs well. Nobody really thought about whether you could or you couldn't as a female or a male. The first general purpose computer, so ENIAC, I can never remember what it all stands for, but the people who built it and the people who programmed it, have a look at that. The men were slightly more involved from the hardware point of view, and the women from a programming perspective, which I think is kind of interesting, but I'm not sure I can really read anything into that. But equal teams. It happened. So what went wrong? Don't know. It's getting worse. And everyone has to do IT at junior school. Gillian put this together based on English figures, so I shoved in the Scottish qualifications as well. But we do see it happen. When people have to do IT, they do it, and then they drop out, and then more drop out, and then more drop out, and so on and so forth. And by the time it gets to university, and as you go through university, the numbers really are worse. And I'm not seeing them get any better. I've been lecturing for years, particularly at Glasgow, and they don't get better. They really don't get better, and that's not necessarily just Glasgow's fault, but it really is. It's not something I've seen get better. I borrowed this presentation from somebody else. I did actually ask her for permission, and her details are at the very last slide in this particular set. It's very interesting. The plan was not necessarily for me to read right through it, so I'm going to just let you read it for yourselves. If there's anyone who can't read it particularly well, let me know, and I will read it out loud for you. So, has everyone got that one? That's not me. So they say math and not maths. Mm-hmm. Anyway. Oops, over too many. Oh, no, didn't. actually slightly disagree with that because we did loads of maths, but that might just be the course that I did. So Terry has a good point. It's not based on ability. I was at the Competing at School Scotland conference recently, partly because I do stuff at universities and in this kind of area, and we start talking about leaky pipeline, that kind of thing, and what can we do about schools and how can we help. And I don't really know what happens at school, not anymore. It's changed a bit since I was there. So I went to the conference to find out the kind of things that go on and what is taught and what has to be taught outside of class and that kind of thing. Met a teacher and it just slipped out, oh yeah, but girls aren't as good at programming as boys. Like, what? Oh no, what I mean is girls think they're not as good as programming as boys, but I'm still thinking that she meant the first bit, which really got me quite sad, actually. Not just sort of a little bit angry, but more just disappointed. So, we're finding these biases in people and they don't even realise that they are. But it's genuinely not ability. Image doesn't help. There's a really poor image of IT. So when they put this together, did a Google search for technical people and that kind of thing, and they're not particularly inclusive and not particularly appealing to some people. Some people don't care about the image. When I studied computing, it was because it was academic and it was interesting and all that kind of stuff. But to a lot of people, this is really off-putting, not particularly the culture that you want to work with, people you're not necessarily attracted to work with, that kind of thing. So we do have an image problem. If you compare ourselves to some of the BRIC countries, like India, for example, the percentages are much, much better potentially because they haven't had the same image problems over the last sort of number of years that have made IT very geeky. When I first set up my Twitter handle, I was proud to be a geek, and I loved that, but I realised that it made more sense to sort of associate something to do with my name, so I changed it. But I'm quite happy with being a geek and not ashamed by it, but it can bring out some sort of biases against the subject, which means people don't study it. But I've talked a lot about gender, but just in general, there's a real business case for equity, no matter whether you are a city council, whether you are a large organisation, whether you're a startup, whether you're a university. And by that I'm not just talking about the students, I am genuinely talking about the staff as well. There are real benefits for everyone. But we have some problems with that, in general. Less than 20% of the workforce were white, male and under 45, but yet we're looking for people like herself, so we keep looking for people like that and therefore miss a huge part of the workforce. We forget that women actually make most of the purchasing decisions in Europe, whether that's in the procurement functions of organisations or whether that's at home. And therefore women would be a real asset to the organisations that we have. Car manufacturers have done better in selling certain types of cars when they brought women in their design teams. One in particular is, I've completely forgotten the make and the thing, so I can't do any advertising, that's probably a good thing. If you approach a car from the side, the front door opens like that, as you'd expect, that's the front, so you can get in as the driver, but also the back door opens like that, which means if you have shopping bags and kids, you can do one thing and the other without having to walk around doors, simple stuff like that. Just benefits from having more people in the team, more ideas, additional creativity, shall we say. We have a real problem in Europe. So if we don't use the females in our workforce, and this is not just IT, this is just in general, if we don't use the females in our workforce, we're going to have a shortfall of 24 million people to do the jobs that we need done in order to keep our economy going. If we use the women that are available, then we reduce that right down to 3 million. So we're going to have a shortfall, but 21 million of that can be addressed by just using the women that we have that are available for work. Companies that have diversity policies have much better customer satisfaction, not just outside of the organisation, people buying from them, but internally from their employees. They feel much more engaged. And it's not big companies as well, it's smaller ones. So in Wales, they had 2,000 companies, small to large, all signing up to diversity policies, and the 93%, I think it was, saw a huge increase in their sales and the money that they were taking in. So there are really, really good reasons for it. And again, it's not just about gender. If you have better diversity in general, people that are studying a certain subject, that kind of thing, you're going to have better candidates to choose from. If you're only focused on one certain type, then you're probably going to miss great opportunities. There's a Harvard study, and there's one I'll show you about how much companies make when they've got women on boards, but just in general in teams, if you have greater diversity in your team will perform trying to think of good English now. Your team will have much better performance than if it was purely men, and if it was purely women. So I had been at a BCS event down in London at Southampton Street, and there's an elderly gentleman had come up to me, and he'd gone to a BCS branch event, met one lady who'd said, "Women are going to rule the world, there's not going to be a place for men." He found this really quite threatening and quite disturbing, and was quite disappointed by it. So my response was, well, actually teams don't perform any better if they're all women versus all men. You really do need a collection of diverse people, in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of age, in terms of all sorts of stuff, which made him feel a lot better, because I did encourage him that he was not made redundant, because I think he was already feeling a little bit redundant as it was. If we've got senior levels of professionals who are exhibiting diversity, though, it's a really, really good thing, because it gives us role models. We realise that it is attainable. And once it gets to the point where it's more of the norm, we're not going to describe people by their diversity, whatever that is. So there'll be no more black politicians or black presidents. There'll be no more female CEOs. There'll just be presidents and CEOs. And wouldn't that be a really nice thing for us to get to, where we don't have to describe somebody by their minority? It would just be lovely to get to one of those days. Oh, gender equality in salary is a really interesting one. When we do really have a problem there, and unconscious bias, which I'll get to in a minute, really does affect this one as well. In IT, it's around about 22%, the gap between males and females. It will vary, and depending on organisation, that kind of thing, but generally that's the gap. When Gillian was telling us about it, though, she said, please don't leave IT and go to banking, because they're reporting a 55% gap. So don't move to financial services if you're not there already, because it might not be any better. But there really is a big problem in pay, and there's a number of reasons for that. People tend to, there are a lot of women in what we would call maybe part-time roles or flexible working roles or alternative working arrangements, and people often value those roles less, even though they may be as fully committed and do potentially more in the hours that they're there than a full-time worker might be. Those roles tend to be undervalued, which means they're paid less. And on the unconscious bias things, where we don't necessarily understand how other people think and behave, women don't ask for pay rises. They just assume they're going to get them because they deserve them, whereas men are much more likely to ask for them. It varies. It varies by individuals. Technical people are worse in general. That's certainly the experience we have with them, that I've been looking at, that people who are in maybe more sales roles, that kind of thing, are much better at asking for money. But in general, men will do it, and women won't. So Vicky Brock, who is the CEO of a small company called Clear Returns, they do analytics to determine whether somebody's taking back garments to a shop that they may have already worn and are looking for a refund, that kind of dodgy stuff. She's interviewed for a number of positions, as in she's for people to work for her, and she found that not one female negotiated their salary, and every single male negotiated their salary. And she would never have negotiated her salary, and she didn't realise until the men did it. So if you work for a company that doesn't have an awful lot of cash to give, and is therefore going to be selective about the pay rises, and you are a manager who has heard a certain group of individuals ask for money and a certain group of individuals not ask for money, the assumption is usually, well, they need it more, and therefore the pay rises tend to be given to the people who've asked for it, even though there are others who might be equally as deserving, if not more. So there's some really interesting things on unconscious bias there, where we just don't know what other people are like because we are not in their gender. Other things to point out. Financial benefits. Companies perform better. I'll show you some charts, whether you're interested or not, I guess. And brand benefits. Companies just appeal more if they have diversity, whether it's on the shop floor or if you have experience of them. It really is, it just looks better, to be honest. We appreciate it more. Equity offers access to the intelligent and gifted, and I think this is quite interesting. So at school, girls are more academic in general. Now, to be fair, this is that's the last number on there is 2006, so the figures are kind of old, but they haven't really changed. At school, girls tend to be more academic. Doesn't mean that the boys aren't capable, it's just a different mindset. That's what I'm going to go with, because I really genuinely just is a different mindset. But if we lose them, we're really losing opportunity if they move into other areas of work. Let's keep them in IT if they are working in IT. Girls tend to be quite good at the interpersonal stuff. As a group, females tend to be, and you'll find that a number of companies are really looking for that, especially now in the days of engagement and customer engagement and trying to give everyone a great experience. This is the charts I said I would talk about. This was done by McKinsey. It's called the Women Matter report. You can get it online if you want to sit and read through it. This was more about people at the top rather than just teams performing. And in terms of having females on the board, the companies that perform the best are the ones that have better diversity. It's been interesting to read over the last few weeks. I think it was a couple of days ago I saw it. Because women in IT has been a thing for a while now that we've been working on, there are actually many more CIOs in the UK who are female than CFOs and COOs, I think it was, which I think is quite interesting. So we're getting there in terms of some senior roles, but yeah, right on the board. Companies perform better because you've just got a different point of view, and it is very valuable to have a different point of view in certain situations. There's a woman called Heidi Rosen, R-O-Z-E-N, and I recommend you Google her and read some of her blogs. She's on a number of boards now in the US. She was known as the Harold and Heidi study. She sent her CV out as Heidi, couldn't get work, changed her name, got lots of job offers. All she'd done was change the name, which is really, really interesting. But she sits on boards all the time, and she's pointed out some interesting things about how people's behaviour and what people just don't think in the same way. When you are with people who are like yourself, there's much less room for innovation, much less room for creativity. So there is real value in having diversity. So the unconscious bias bit, it's the bit about all that information you have to process, and there's far too much of it. So we just all think about stereotypes, and we don't necessarily know those stereotypes exist in our head, but there's quite a lot of them. So, but it's really interesting. So 75% of both men and women have an implicit stereotype in which they strongly associate women with family and men with career. Fact. That's what happened. They did the study. That's what people think. There's a strong attitudinal preference for youth, which is as strong in people who are young as people who are old. I'm going to tell you about a test in just a second. Gillian did, and Gillian admits that she has a preference for the young ever so slightly. I also did, and I have a preference for the old, which is very interesting. I don't really know what that means. Racial bias occurs regardless of age, gender, or education. The very first thing that you notice when you see people is colour. It's the first thing you notice over anything else before the way you see people move, the way that the words that you use, the vocabulary, the language that they're speaking, anything, it is colour, and we notice that. And if that's, depending on who you are, that can mean an automatic bias against. And this is a really interesting one. So 58% of Fortune 500 CEOs are 6 foot tall or higher. Only 14.5% of the population are that height. So it's people hiring people like themselves. It's a circuit, a small circuit of, so gents, I don't know how tall you are. Clearly you're quite tall. But you know, how would you feel if people are biased against you because you're just not quite, 6 foot? Isn't that crazy? I would never even have thought about it, but it genuinely exists. It's just, and people don't necessarily know, hence the unconscious part. And it's that thing where there's too much information all the time that, looking around the room, so many things to bring in and to think about and process, and who's sitting where and what colours and where the windows are and where the fire escape is. And so we do resort to stereotypes in order to categorise people, and because our brains can't cope with so much information. We do it all the time. How many people have bought a new car and then realised, oh, everyone's driving this, but I'd never spotted it before? Right, because you've shut out things you didn't need to know, but now that you're focused on this particular car, you realise actually quite a few of them do exist. It's the way our brains process stuff. So there are stereotypes, they do exist, and we do think about them, and sometimes we let them influence our judgments on people when we meet them for the first time, and potentially 2 or 3 or many times after that. The test I talked about is the implicit association test. If you look up, I think it's projectimplicit.com or something, but Project Implicit, just Google it, we all do. And you're presented with a couple of options. You can do some demonstration tests, or you can help them do some of the research that they're doing at the moment. And it looks at things like race and age and gender and religion. Gender career and gender science is a particularly interesting one. The skin tone. It's worthwhile having a look and going through some of these. They take about 10 minutes each, so I haven't done every single one, but I have done 1 or 2 of them, and kind of interesting. Some certain things surprise me. I'm not willing to reveal all of it. Some of it was actually for me very positive, but I was wondering whether I was overthinking or not. But let's make these biases conscious. If we're aware about the bias that we have, then we can work out whether we want to deal with it, and if we are going to deal with it, how we do that. Use the unconscious bias training course that the BCS is going to have available for people to do. This isn't really an advert, but maybe that is one of the answers. There are lots of unintended consequences of having unconscious bias. It's, like I said earlier, a lot of it's not intentional. Sure, some of us will meet racism or ageism or sexism in the workforce. It does happen, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the stuff that people really didn't mean. And where's the one down here? The marketing campaigns, which I think is quite interesting. So advertisers playing the man as the helpless, I can't do anything in the house. A lot of people, that's just an unconscious thing where, oh, he's a man, he's not going to be any good at anything. I don't know about you guys, but I would be quite offended at that. My other half would be really offended at that. He's a really good cook. So there are certain things that will actually backfire if you don't think about what your bias could be. So I've already mentioned salary and pay, that kind of thing. Promotions. You promote the people who shout the loudest. Women tend to not shout very much. Men can do. As groups in general, I am talking generalisations here, but that's because in a way, it's true. So women can be overlooked for promotions because they're expecting to get them. Men tend to fight for them, to ask for them, to expect them. Tend to be more competitive than some women. I'm very competitive with myself, but less so I get with my colleagues. So I want to do better than I've done before, but not necessarily better than Martin or Chris, the people that I work with. Mentoring people. If you end up mentoring people like you, you start telling them things that are about like you, and you end up with quite a narrow focus of the world, a narrow view of the world rather. Similar if you're being mentored by somebody. Performance reviews have already talked about people who shout the loudest, people who are visible to their management. Tends to be men more than women, because women get on with the job and expect to be rewarded for doing a good job. And there's lots of organisations where that just doesn't work. Selection of board members, it's a boys' club. It really is an old man's club kind of thing. And if there's only men in it, then there's only men that are going to get into it. A lot of women have worked very, very, very hard to get on boards. I'm not saying that's for everybody, not everybody wants to do it, but if it is going to affect the economy that we live within, then actually this is pretty important to you and I, even if we're not necessarily going to be sitting on them. I've talked about marketing campaigns, research funding, so think about it within an academic context. If you've got things like Athena, these days, people are interested in diversity within an organisation, even if it's a university. Is there enough diversity in your organisation which means you will qualify for funding? If there's not, it's not there anymore. And you know, the quality of research in a university, I appreciate, is particularly important and attractive. The more, I guess, the higher you're rated, the more attractive you are for further research funding. Working with customers, it's not so. We have had interesting conversations within the company that I work for. And we're with the kind of company where you bring 10 people to a meeting because somebody's a specialist in this and somebody's a specialist in that, and sometimes it gets a little bit ridiculous, but we quite often do take quite a few people to a meeting. And if you are 10 men and then you go to meet an organisation that's got 2 women, sometimes it just doesn't quite work, doesn't quite gel. It depends on the individuals, but in terms of groups, if you're going to work with your customers, you're going to want to represent your customers, who they are, and the best way to do that is make sure you've got diversity, because your customers are going to be a diverse set of people as well. So what can we do about it? Because I'm just kind of preaching about all these bad things that, related to unconscious bias. So if you think about an organisation, we should audit culture. What is your culture of your organisation? And you can measure what your culture is and review it. Measure your diversity. What does it look like? Some people will argue for quotas or targets. So I'm not always comfortable with thinking that I would be there as a number. I'd like to be there based on my capability and the fact that I can get on with the team and all that kind of thing. But people do argue that quotas work, and they've worked in some of the Scandinavian countries. So maybe it is something that we should be considering more. We should look at recruitment. Who are we recruiting? Who is doing the recruiting? Is it the same people all the time? Are they all from a particular ethnic group? Do we have diversity in the recruitment that we're doing? What are the words that we're using? We use different words. So back to one of the previous slides, one of the things I was going to mention, somebody met with 3 CEOs and they all talked about being hungry. Those CEOs were male. This person then went to a conference with 150 women, and not one woman referred to herself as hungry. Although if they were dieting, they probably were, but not one of them said they were hungry. They were ambitious, and there's another word, but we have different language. We don't realise that we have different languages. So we need to make sure that when we're recruiting, the articles that we have, the things that we have online, they actually use a language that's appealing to everyone, not just necessarily one particular set of individuals. Performance management. So review how we're doing performance management. Are we really looking at people who are shouting the loudest? Are we helping the people who are not shouting the loudest to shout? When we promote, are we promoting people who've asked for it, or promoting people that really do deserve it? And it might be both. Are we giving people the interesting work because they've asked for it? Or are those who haven't asked for it but have been working very hard getting the same opportunities from an assignment perspective? And mentoring. Do we mentor? Do we mentor our women to make sure that they understand that they should potentially be going for opportunities that they don't think they're qualified for? And are we mentoring our men to say, this is how you can work more successfully with a woman? And because so often what we do is we demand women to change to meet a male environment, but actually maybe everyone needs to think about everybody and just understand that we all work in different ways. Educate. Start at the top. People at the top of an organisation really need to know why this is so important. But it's not just them, don't just stop there. It needs to work its way all the way down. I've seen too many times where the people at the top, the vice presidents, the execs, they all get it, think it's really important, but the people down in middle management don't have the time to think about it. And if there's no way to kind of change their behaviour, help them change their behaviour by putting in the right measurements to encourage diversity, then it's just going to get forgotten at middle management. So middle management need to know, because those of us who are not middle management and are on the ground can see it all the time, and it's just really frustrating. So what can you do? What can I do? Complete an IAT, that's the implicit association test. Do it, seriously, it's interesting. I might share afterwards, I haven't had alcohol, so I will take guts, but I might share some of my biases later on, but definitely not on YouTube. And understand what unconscious and implicit bias means. Unconscious bias is things you don't know you are biased against. And it is hard. The test helps. Take your rightful place at the table. Anyone here read Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In book? But I read it because people were going on about it, and there's lots of things I agree, a few things I'm not sure I do. But one of the points she made was she had gone to a meeting and all the women had sat right. It was a board style meeting, not a board meeting, and all the women had sat on the edge, and all the men had sat at the table. And she said, put yourself forward for things. It's okay. Now, actually, sometimes it's okay to take a step back and just observe and learn and watch and not take part, because you don't always have to take part. But actually, maybe we should be putting ourselves forward for things. So, ladies, if that's not your style, please do it. Men, if it's not your style, actually, you should do it as well. And be proud of who you are. We are all different, and it is okay to be different. If everyone was the same, how boring would the world be? I mean, it really seriously would be. One of the other things you can do is not make everything pink. And I have a really big thing about this. I spoke at Glasgow on pinkification recently. Not everything needs to be pink. For a long time, I didn't wear pink at all because of it. And actually, one of my nieces won't wear pink, and she's 5, because everyone wears pink. The other one, who's 3, she does. She loves it. Pink's everything has to be pink. And one of her favourite Christmas presents was the Hoover, and it was quite amusing to watch them. But yeah, don't make everything pink. Women don't want everything pink. We don't want it all stereotyped like that. Pink isn't a feature, and yeah, it's fine to enjoy and embrace the colour. I'm now comfortable with it, but it took a long time just because people associate it with certain characters like Reese Witherspoon in Legally Blonde, and it's not helpful for those of us who have really had to fight, I think, to carry on. Yeah, prove your value. So whoever you are, but particularly if you are a minority, prove your value. Make sure people know what you're good at and what you've delivered. Going back to the pay rises, write down the things that you've achieved in the last year. And I mean, 12 months. I don't mean calendar year, because that's only been a few weeks. But what have you delivered? What have you changed? Whose lives have you changed in the office? What processes have you improved? What did you deliver? What was quicker than you said you would do? All sorts of stuff. Prove your value to people, but to yourself first. Sometimes I find people don't need to. It's actually proving to yourself that you can do it. Can be the start. Get mentors. I'll talk about mentors in just a second again. But get mentors, no matter who you are. Mentors are a really, really, really valuable component in your life, whether you're male or female or black or white, or they really are good things. And look at role models who are doing well. What did they have to do? Sometimes it's just asking the right questions, challenging the system. People make too many assumptions about what can and can't be done. We have a mobility clause in our organisation. When you get to certain levels, you have to be mobile, but nobody says how quickly you have to be mobile. So there are certain things that you can really think about and challenge. Get involved in stuff like this. It's another way to grow your network and meet interesting people, but also to demonstrate again the value that you have, whether it's organising an event, whether it's doing what I'm doing, whether it's being vice chair. It's another way of demonstrating your value, and that you're not just the same as everybody else, not just the stereotype that people think you are. Ask for a pay rise annually, ask for one at the start. I'm going to keep mentioning pay rises. I don't normally do that, I get quite uncomfortable about the subject of money, but Gillian goes on about it a lot because it really matters, so I really do. Evaluate your manager, that's a really interesting one. I'm going to suggest something in just a minute as well, to do with management. But down here, this is really interesting, 70% of female respondents rate their own performance as equivalent to that of their co-worker, while 70% of men rate themselves higher than co-worker. It's just how we see ourselves and the value that we have. But yeah, you know, how we think of ourselves and how we rate ourselves and how much we criticise ourselves can vary based on gender. So men, be aware of that. We self-criticise quite a lot. I have gone too far that time. Well, I haven't. Can't use my machine. So networking, really, really, really important. It doesn't, to be honest, it doesn't matter who you are, but generally women don't do enough. Men tend to be better at it. Not because women aren't chatty folk, because you all know that we can chat. Although I used to find that really, really, really hard. But men tend to be slightly more targeted in networking, tend to have an objective. Women, we can learn from that. Come to events like that, like this, thinking, right, I'd like to meet 2 new people, or no, find out who's going in advance, and I'd like to meet that person and understand a little bit more about their job. You know, go with a purpose. You know, if you find networking really scary, you know, I'm going to say hi to a couple of people. You know, give yourself reasonable objectives. I'm not suggesting that, you know, next time you're going to be come along to an event and then offer to present at the next one, but find yourself realistic objectives for when you network. Go to women events. So as BCS Women, I have some events that I don't run jointly with branches. I'm in Edinburgh, so I haven't made it up here yet. I need to know I've got a network of people that are going to come along, so that I don't come along and have an event with 2 people. So I started mostly in Edinburgh, but I want to have more around Scotland. Women-led events are great because you probably have more people around you who feel a bit like you do. But don't only network with women, because they're only 18% of the population in IT, and therefore you're really going to limit your opportunities if you do that. So women, please get out and meet the men. They're not as scary as you might think. And men, we are not as scary as you might think. Also, most of the women-led events are open to everybody. I haven't come across one that has said men are not welcome. And actually, I think it's a very valuable thing if men are there. So that, you know, I talked about limiting creativity and limiting the innovation and better performance if there's more diversity, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, men would be very welcome. And women role models are really important, just because we haven't seen enough of them. So if you know of anyone who has achieved quite a lot, is doing well, go onto Wikipedia and create an entry for them in Wikipedia. We've had a couple of events down in Edinburgh where we've actually all got together and actually put some entries in for women who've been quite successful. It's easier to do it in the academic area because you have to be known for something. So if you're in academia, there's, you know, publishing papers, that kind of thing qualifies you quite quickly for being an entry in Wikipedia. So that's one thing. But if you know people who you think are great role models, tell me about them and we'll arrange an event and get them to speak at it. One of the things we did in June last year was about networking. Ran an event on networking, and we had 3 speakers on networking and how they approach networking. The first was a gent. Ali's great. Everybody loves Ali. He does it in quite a subtle way, but he's particularly good at networking. The second one, who was asked, didn't realise she was a really good networker because she just does it. And if we hadn't asked her, she would never have said, "Oh, I'll come and speak at your event." She's a CEO of an organisation. It's not like, but she just never really thought about the fact that she does it very well. You know, and she gets to know people and what matters to them. So, you know, she can use them for something, not because she necessarily has an ulterior motive, but it works out very well. And the third person was talking about how valuable networking has been to her because she works in contract. Well, she is a contractor, and therefore, you know, her network is very important there, rather than somebody who's worked like me, who's worked for the same company for 13 years. And yeah, networking, I've mentioned lots of things. Volunteer to arrange networking events. That's a really good way to meet people. If you're like me, and I always find I was too busy to go to the Edinburgh branch events, and I thought, well, if I arrange something, then at least I'll be there. So, you know, get involved. You know, I'm sure the people up here would be really happy to get more volunteers, and I'm always looking for people to help out and run things. Be able to articulate your role, that's really important. You got yourself a 30-second elevator pitch. It's such a kind of salesy thing, but it's actually really important, because if you are networking and you meet somebody for the first time, and it takes you 10 minutes to describe what the job you do is, then they're probably going to have switched off. It's taken me a long time to refine mine, and to say, you know, my job is about helping companies make money out of people. works in some environments and doesn't in others. But that's have a short, sharp way of explaining who you are and what you do and the value that you bring, because you bring value. Follow up and contacts and referrals. Don't just meet somebody and then never ever speak to them ever again. See if somebody says, oh, I know somebody you'd like to meet, make sure you get their number, make sure you get their email address or Twitter handle or something, and follow up on it. And mentoring, I said I'd come back to mentoring. Mentoring is really important, and it doesn't always have to be really formal. Thou shalt meet once a month and have a certain plan and have met those objectives and done your homework and all that kind of stuff. Although that can really add value if you're trying to achieve, say, a professional qualification or a promotion or even a pay rise. It can be much more informal about how do I work in this environment? I'm not quite sure how to work with this particular person, or I'd like to see my way through the company, but I can't quite work out what the path would be for me, or I'm finding it quite difficult within this university environment to progress because it's very competitive. How did you do it in the university that you work for example? Don't just pick women, pick men, because men have a different point of view, they'll be well connected. But don't just pick men, pick women, because they'll have a different point of view and be differently connected. And if you are a man, please think about mentoring women, because they'll learn a lot from you, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit from them as well. If you have friends who've got children who are females, encourage them to do techie things, whether it's play with Raspberry Pi or just build Lego friends. Seriously think about that. I don't think men realise the impact that they have on younger people in terms of moving forward in their careers. I was at an event and was very fortunate to be asked to speak with, it was a round table, not speak at, but speak with one of the politicians, one of the councillors for an area up here actually. And he was trying to understand what the women in IT problem was, and you kind of feel like you're having the same conversation over and over again. But we realised that every single female around the table had had somebody in their life who worked in IT in one way or another. So with me, it was a very close, like an uncle kind of guy, my friend's dad, who's actually my computing teacher. Somebody else, it was their dad, somebody else, it was their uncle, somebody else, it was their mum, somebody else, girls are much more likely to enter technical professions if somebody has encouraged them into it and said it's the right thing to do. Like I said earlier, I wouldn't want to be a number, really don't want to be a number. I want to be there appointed to something on merit, but there's much more likely to have women who are there on merit if they have gone through it. Oh yeah, it's not about the same race either, or same religion, or same, do think about getting a number of mentors. If you're not getting what you need, go somewhere else. This is where I talked about managers very briefly. I'm not sure how you find another manager. It's not an easy thing to do. But if you can, and if you find the one that you have, you're really struggling to work with, if there is a way to get around that, to change it, work hard to do it, because it'll be worth it. It will make your employee, your work life much more comfortable. Get another job. That's always a fun one. I'm going to make up statistics. So that's not fair. All I'm going to say then, I'm going to generalise. In general, men will look at a list of qualifications they need for a job, see they've got not very many of those and go, that's fine, I can get the rest. And in general, women will look at that and go, right, I haven't got very many of those, I actually want to have a lot of them, so I'm not going to apply for the job. Rather than thinking, how good am I at picking up stuff? How many things have I been asked to do that I've not actually had the skills for and learned the skills? Maybe I could apply for the job too. So do find another job and get experience outside your organisation as well to help you grow as an individual and help you understand what other people are like and what they think. So computing is fun. We all work in IT for one reason or another, but it's fun. It's always changing. It's never the same. Sometimes that's quite hard. I do pity anyone who's teaching it, I must admit, because it's hard enough trying to sell it, but teaching it every year must be really hard. But you can have so much fun in IT, whether it's in academia and public sector and startups, in large organisations, in all of them. There is so much that you can do. Wouldn't it be great if other people had that same experience that we get? We don't want to overemphasise gender differences, so let's not start analysing everyone too much when we go to work tomorrow and thinking what all their motives are and what they're thinking about. But we use computers all the time. I am carrying, well not right now, clearly, but in my bags I have 2 phones, an iPad and a laptop. we use it a lot. The two phones are so I can switch the work one off when I'm not at work. But people can still contact me on holiday. Women use computing. 51% of the population are women, and most of them will use devices of some sort. They will interact online in some way. They'll get cash at a cash machine. It's all technology. Wouldn't it be great if we had more women influencing it? So yeah, open the floor for questions. I'm always looking for people who've got interesting ideas, controversial ideas, who want to have a debate, whatever, so we can run events. So be very, very pleased if you get in touch. Let me know if there's any way you'd like to get involved.